Welcome to this explainer. Let's jump right into a truly fascinating piece of history today. Just picture the beautifully chaotic streets of Delhi for a second. You've got auto rickshaws weaving, vendors on pavements, loud music blasting from every corner. Honestly, it looks like absolute anarchy. To help us make sense of this, our source material introduces us to two people: a young law student named Rohan and a seasoned senior advocate, Mr. Harish, who are sharing a cup of tea right outside the Supreme Court of India. Rohan is looking at this glorious, noisy chaos and wondering aloud why he's even bothering to study law when everything in India just seems like a massive free-for-all. But Mr. Harish immediately flips that entire perspective on its head.
Harish replies with this incredible quote. He says, "In India, it is not that everything is legal. It is that everything is a free-for-all until one single person decides to complain." And guys, this is the core thesis of our explainer today. The fabric of modern Indian civil society wasn't just neatly stitched together by proactive politicians. Massive, society-altering practices were perfectly normal and completely unregulated, right up until the exact moment one stubborn citizen drafted a public interest litigation, a PIL, and placed it directly before a judge.
Section 1. Fixing Everyday Life. The Power of Complaints.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's wild to look back at how everyday, deeply entrenched annoyances actually sparked monumental cultural shifts. If you were around before 2012, you probably remember that every other car in India looked like a literal mafia getaway vehicle. Hiding behind pitch-black tinted windows was the ultimate symbol of VIP culture. But an observant citizen named Avishek Goenka noticed a really chilling trend. Heinous crimes like kidnappings were happening inside these moving vehicles simply because criminals were completely shielded from public view. The traffic police couldn't see a thing. So Goenka filed a petition and the Supreme Court completely banned aftermarket Sun films. Overnight, a multi-crore accessory industry was dismantled. People were literally on the side of the road using their fingernails to scratch off the adhesive film. A deeply ingrained habit was just wiped out for public safety, all because one guy connected the dots.
And that perfectly illustrates another massive shift, this time regarding the very air we breathe. Back in the 80s and 90s, smoking was literally everywhere. Hospital waiting rooms, trains, college corridors. It was a total hotbox of blue smoke, and completely legal. Enter Murli S. Diora. In 2001, he stepped into the Supreme Court and made a brilliantly simple constitutional argument. He didn't just say smoking was bad. He argued that passive smoking violated a non-smoker's Article 21 right to life. I mean, how can you enjoy your right to life if you're actively being poisoned on a public bus? The Supreme Court agreed with him, ending a toxic social norm and averting a massive public health crisis in one swoop.
Section 2. Protecting the environment. The Titan of Law.
Let's step away from the daily commute for a second and look at the actual geography and heritage of the nation. We have to introduce a man who is an absolute titan of environmental law, M.C. Mehta. Back in the 1980s, the pristine white marble of the Taj Mahal was turning this sickly yellowish color. Why? It was surrounded by hundreds of factories emitting sulfur dioxide, creating acid rain that was literally eating away at the monument. But nobody stopped them because, well, it provided jobs. That was just the status quo. So MC Mehta filed a PIL. He stood totally alone against a battery of expensive corporate lawyers and argued that India's cultural heritage was being destroyed for private profit. And it worked. The Supreme Court ordered the relocation of those industries and mandated a switch to natural gas. His single complaint literally saved the Taj Mahal.
But Mehta didn't just stop at monuments. He systematically choked off pollution at its source. Take the River Ganga, for example. It was an open secret that tanneries in Kanpur were dumping millions of liters of highly toxic chemical waste directly into the holy river. Again, Mehta files a PIL. And again, the Supreme Court steps in, ordering over 200 tanneries without proper treatment plants to shut down immediately.
But perhaps his most profound legal victory actually came out of a massive tragedy. Following the terrifying 1985 oleum gas leak in Delhi, Mehta filed yet another PIL. Out of this specific case, the Supreme Court created the foundational principle of absolute liability. What does that mean? It means that a hazardous enterprise has a non-delegable duty to the community. If they cause harm, they are absolutely liable to compensate people, with zero exceptions. Before Mehta, rivers ran black and the air was literal poison, and it was just considered a normal Tuesday. He fundamentally forged corporate environmental responsibility in India.
Section 3. The 10 p.m. silence. Battling noise pollution.
So we've seen how a solitary voice can alter the physical landscape. But what about the soundscape? We all know India has a famously loud culture. Night-long festivals, weddings, political rallies.
For decades, blasting loudspeakers all night was basically considered a fundamental right. But a few really frustrated citizens, along with activists and doctors, started meticulously documenting the actual trauma this noise pollution caused. We're talking hearing loss, hypertension, major psychological distress. When this finally reached the Supreme Court in 2005, the judges delivered a verdict that shook the country's cultural foundations. They established the right to sleep, ruling that it's a fundamental right under Article 21. They mandated a strict ban on loudspeakers between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Powerful political and religious groups suddenly had to legally switch off their microphones, all because a few tired citizens just demanded a quiet night.
Section 4. A fight for survival. Regulating acid sales.
We've talked a lot about quality of life issues so far. Cars, smoke, noise. But I want to lower the tone here and transition to a much heavier reality, because sometimes a single complaint is a brutal, urgent matter of physical survival. 30 rupees. Until 2013, flesh-melting, concentrated acid cost a mere 30 rupees in India. It was cheaper than a standard bottle of shampoo. You didn't need an ID, you didn't need a license to buy it, it was completely unregulated and 100% legal to purchase right over the counter. And as a tragic result, hundreds of young women had their lives destroyed by vindictive attackers, while the state did absolutely nothing to regulate the weapon itself.
Then came Lakshmi Agrawal. In 2005, when Lakshmi was just 15 years old, she was devastatingly attacked with acid by a man whose advances she had rejected. But Lakshmi absolutely refused to hide in the shadows. She went out and gathered 27,000 signatures, and her scarred face became a heroic testament to the state's failure. She filed a PIL asking an incredibly simple question: how could the government allow a deadly weapon to be sold so freely? Her courage achieved something monumental. In 2013, the Supreme Court delivered a massive verdict on Lakshmi PIL. The sale of acid was finally heavily regulated. They mandated IDs and bioregisters. Sellers suddenly had to declare their stock to the police. Furthermore, the Indian Penal Code was amended to include specific sections just for acid attacks, carrying a strict minimum 10-year sentence. The court also mandated a minimum 3 lakh rupee victim compensation. Lakshmi Agrawal single-handedly forced a sprawling, entirely apathetic system to protect countless women from horrific violence.
Section 5. The pendulum swings. Judicial overreach.
It truly is a superpower, isn't it? This ability to bypass the slow wheels of Parliament and just change the law. But as Harish points out to Rohan with a touch of wry humor, like all superpowers, it can be pretty unpredictable. Sometimes the pendulum of society swings into realms of sheer absurdity. Just look at this bizarre case from 2016. A retired engineer named Sham Narayan Chuksi went to see a Bollywood movie. A scene played that featured the national anthem, and of course he stood up. But he noticed other patrons just kept sitting there, eating their popcorn. He was deeply offended and felt it showed major moral decay. So what did he do? He used the superpower. He filed a PIL demanding it be legally mandatory for the anthem to be played in all cinemas and for everyone to stand up.
And surprisingly, the court actually agreed with him. In November 2016, they made it mandatory. The aftermath was just unprecedented chaos. Going to see a Marvel movie suddenly became a high-stakes test of patriotism. Theater doors were locked. Vigilante groups were policing the aisles. People were actually being assaulted. It sparked this massive heated debate on forced nationalism. It was a classic case of judicial overreach. Finally, in 2018, the court had to awkwardly walk the whole thing back and make playing the anthem optional again. But honestly, it proved a fascinating point. One guy's complaint literally forced 1 billion people to change their behavior.
Section 6. Design of Democracy. Articles 32 and 226.
So, as our explainer draws to a close today, let's bring it back to Harish and Rohan, standing out there in the cool night air outside the Supreme Court building. We need to understand the actual mechanics behind all these stories. How is any of this legally possible? Well, the founders of the nation, visionaries like B.R. Ambedkar, knew that Parliament would sometimes just be too slow to protect the marginalized. So they gave us the Public Interest Litigation. Under Articles 32 and 226, the courts relaxed what's known as locus standi. Now, in traditional law, you can only go to court if you are personally injured. But the PIL mechanism allows any public-spirited citizen to knock on the doors of the highest court on behalf of the greater public. It literally empowers the solitary voice.
Just look at this incredible roll call of unsung heroes. Avishek Goenka, Murli S. Diora, M.C. Mehta, Lakshmi Agrawal. They weren't powerful politicians or billionaires. They were just regular citizens who looked at deeply entrenched, totally legal but harmful societal norms and said, no, this is wrong. And by doing that, they changed the nation.
As Rohan packed his books up that night, looking at the clear windows on the cars passing by, breathing the smoke-free air, and listening to the city actually quiet down at 10 p.m., he realized something profound. The law is not just a static, dusty book. It is a living, breathing creature. Which leaves us with one final provocative question for you to think about. What entirely normal, legally accepted practice of today will be completely dismantled tomorrow, just because someone, somewhere, finally decides to complain?
Please like and subscribe.